Imagine an animated film with the visual artistry of Nimona and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. One with the heart and soul of The Mitchells vs. the Machines and WALL-E. And one with the world building and grandiosity of Hilda and Arcane. That's what The Wild Robot felt like. Hi there, I'm Swagbroski, and I was fortunate enough to attend the world premiere of The Wild Robot during the Toronto International Film Festival of 2024. It was on September 8th, 3 weeks ahead of its theatrical release date of September 27th. During this video, I'll do my best to keep spoilers relating to the film's major events to a minimum. I'll only be sharing my thoughts on its craftsmanship, morale, and all the spectacles. Things I praise about this movie, and the qualities I'd like viewers to know of before their screenings. The Wild Robot is a film that I'm really excited for to release in theaters globally, and one that I think any audience can watch. For some organization, this video will be split into the following segments. Feel free to skip to any section of my review by going to its respective timestamp on the screen. For efficiency's sake, I've also included the timestamps in the description. You could simply click on the timestamp you want to travel to, or hit Ctrl and one of the horizontal arrow keys. If you're on mobile, you can double tap on either side of the video screen with 2 fingers. Alright, let's get back to the show. Now, before I went to the screening at Roy Thomson Hall, I'd only heard little bites of information here and there. The only film that I watched at TIFF beforehand was a 2023 screening of American Fiction, so it was safe to say that I would have been going into my next screening completely blind this year, if not for doing some research myself. Here's what I found. TIFF would showcase this film as a gala presentation, and that the first screening of its run in the festival, the one I ended up attending, would typically be known as a premium screening. Gala presentations refer to films that hold high prestige in their casting or quality, so much so that these films can hold a red carpet where its cast and crew get to meet with the audience, and a premium screening is where said crew can attend and watch the film alongside the audience. Afterward, they can use a brief time slot where each crew member talks about their own experience of contributing to the film. I actually went in the screening blind. Just wanted to give a little foreword for the purposes of this video. Whoopsies! Again, this was the world premiere of The Wild Robot. Last year, I didn't take a chance on another animated film at TIFF, that being The Boy and the Heron, and it ended up winning the Oscar for Best Animated Picture, so it was best if I took my chances this time around. For the experience, right? The Wild Robot is an animated film that adapts from the original 2016 novel. It was directed by Chris Sanders and produced by the talented folks at DreamWorks Animation, and is currently set to release on September 27, 2024. The film revolves around the titular robot, Roz, shorthand for Rosm 7134. After having been washed ashore onto an island, she learns to adapt to her surroundings and supply for the needs of a runt goose. I'd like to describe my experience watching in the auditorium. Well, concert hall. This was the first time that I attended the premiere of something with as large of a scope as this. Critics and film lovers, family and friends, as well as the film's crew and cast, all under one roof, unified in watching the same film. And I did say crew and cast. The Roy Thomson Hall has a maximum capacity of 2,630 people, and when I ordered tickets to the screening, nearly all of the seats had sold out. To kickstart the screening, TIFF CEO, Cameron Bailey, came on stage and introduced the movie. He commented on what captivated him with the movie, being its emotional standpoint. Shortly after, he introduced everyone else that would attend the screening, and the list just kept on going. Among the leadership department that was present were Sanders, who was the director and the screenplay writer, its producer, Jeff Herman, the original author, Peter Brown, and the film's composer, Chris Bowers. I felt each of their efforts through the screen, most notably through the screenplay when I compared it to the novel. Fantastic work. Among the voice cast, the people that were present were Mark Hamill, Stephanie Hsu, Catherine O'Hara, Kit Connor, and Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah!
I wholly praise the cast in this film. I'm still amazed at how they delivered these raw and emotional performances and provided for the souls in their respective characters. As per usual with every TIFF screening, an acknowledgement and a few clips from the festival sponsors would play first. And after that, the film would begin. By the time the credits rolled, I saw the hall give a standing ovation. Among the applause was a few whooping and a ton of crying. The interview with the cast was nice as well. It gave some insight on how they would go about contributing to the film and the many inspirations and influences they would credit to their work. I might include some of what they said in the video if it proves interesting. I still can't believe I was in the same hall as all of these people. I'm so used to watching the behind-the-scenes featurettes at the back of a screen that I alienate myself from the crew. What feels like a concrete boundary of audience and filmmakers that doesn't have to be. We're all just human. With some perseverance, I could contribute to a film as big as this one someday. There's nothing they can do that I can't. Roz, Brightbill, and Fink are the main trio of characters in The Wild Robot. Rosm7134, or Roz, is a robot that finds herself washed ashore on the island. Although made of mechanical parts, she grows a courageous heart within her, with a priority to complete her assigned task. Her determination and lack of exhaustion, being a robot, paved the way for her actions to sprout kindness and generosity from fear and mockery. I love the many ways her character development is presented throughout the movie. The certain abilities she gains in order to adapt to the animals and their wilderness, and her emotional complex and understanding slowly forming. At the start of the movie, Roz's voice initially sounds friendly, yet monotonously optimistic, similar to existing AI like Google Assistant. It gradually becomes more humane, deeper, warmer, and motherly. By comparing earlier scenes from the start of the movie to nearing the end, you could notice all of the subtleties in her voice as time progressed. You can hear how much this island has changed her, for a robot. I really praise her voice actor for that. Her language convention, when compared to the animals, starts off as mostly corporate and stiff. To be really specific, I noticed that she tended to omit the use of contractions in her speech, but this quality gets eradicated later on in the film. The animals are closer bound, and their speech is much more colloquial and natural. This contrast presents Roz as more of an alien figure and a perceived monster. WALL-E comes to mind when I think about a robot that encompasses emotions as well. But both of these films have such different backgrounds, influences, and morals. I still think Roz could be best friends with him though. Also, Roz's initial lack of tonal understanding and her verbatim robotiness make for some incredible humor in this movie, particularly around Fink. Roz wouldn't know what's considered as brash and offensive, and would just speak bluntly from her database. It's a refreshing side to brutal honesty that I haven't seen anywhere else. Although, this quality comes back to bite her. That was during this one marvelous scene halfway through the film where she talks to herself. It'll make much more sense if you watch it on your own. Either way, I'd love to really ramble about the scene someday. On the other hand, I commend The Wild Robot's use of dialogue. It's never redundant, but always sufficient and carries that meaning. Many quotes from this film achieve a status of memorability that are similar to those in The Boy, The Mole, The Fox, and The Horse, and they carry much more meaning than just to service the film. Fink is one of the first animals that Roz meets, the first who starts to trust and accompany her alongside the journey. Behind what appears on the surface as some arrogant, lazy, and isolated fox is a companion whose loyalty and motivation helps fuel that confidence in others, especially Roz and Brightbill. Speaking of the latter, Brightbill is the runt gosling that Roz subsequently adopts after his hatching. Naturally, having grown alongside Roz, He takes from her robotic attributes, but is ostracized and mocked by the rest of the island flock as a result. Brightbill shares numerous parallels to Roz in how people react to them, and a key piece of his character development is how he has to grapple with that before the winter migration. These parallels also add to that impossible scenario of the film's synopsis, how nature and robots, or geese grown by robots, would behave when interacting with one another. Brightbill's voice acting is among the strongest in this entire film. There's this youth and innocence to his voice that drew me in, and his acting and emotional range really helped in making me care about his character. He goes on an incredibly emotional monologue at one point, to which I actually cried. If you were in his mother's position, how would you feel? Supporting characters like Pinktail the opossum and Longneck, the migration leader for the geese, were also serviceful. Although, I'm wondering what the movie would have looked like if Longneck was introduced sooner. Pinktail and her kids ignited the auditorium because of how chaotic and murderous their remarks were. Mark Hamill described this film as the ultimate fish-out-of-water story for Roz and Brightbill. They started as outcasts, but through courage and determination, they ended up proving that their differences, and the differences of everyone in the island, were their strengths. Ultimately, Roz is the one who unites the island from its discord. Along with the wild robot's unique premise and simple structure, its themes are plentiful. The mother and son relationship of Roz and Brightbill proves that love can thrive even in the most unlikely of predicaments, and that family isn't all about blood. Motherhood is portrayed splendidly within the movie, and Brightbill's accident teaches Roz about a mother's love, protection, and loyalty. In terms of the story's general flow and progression, I had no problems at all. The pacing felt consistent the whole way through, and the team was proficient at using all of the time they had. None of the scenes felt like they were added just to lengthen the film's runtime, and numerous leads and important moments would also be recalled in later parts of the film. This was something that I could learn from the film crew. Cut the fluff. Make sure that each moment mattered, each interaction and each scene contributing to a character's progression and arc. The movie's structure demonstrated a clear knowledge in how to balance entertainment, spectacle, storytelling, and morale. There was always something going on, and it felt like anything could happen. An incredibly important factor on how the wild robot portrays its gigantic world is through its visual material and art style. The wild robot primarily takes place in an expansive island. The island decor flourishes in bright grassland, spruce trees, and lakes aplenty, a rocky cliffside also present. There's an abundance of wildlife and plant life on the island too, and each critter behaves in their own unique way. I want to commend the character acting in the wild robot. It's all so real and authentic, and could go on to rival the work in Arcane. As much as voice acting is needed, a visual front, more often than not, matters just as much in giving a lasting impression of these characters, a face to the voice. The background work and overall visual style used for the film resembled an oil painting by tending to simplify flowers and foliage into opaque, yet smooth and recognizable strokes. It sounds like the backgrounds would appear flat and stagnant, but that's not the case at all. The frame was often dynamic and moving, and the visuals still showed that contrast in its lighting and shading. I wish I could have watched this movie again in theaters. It looked so beautiful and appealing, and I could say that a lot of these shots could be used as wallpapers. The use of visual effects is also quite mesmerizing, whether it be through rampant rapids or explosive flares. The Rosin robots share this smooth and round design in being utility robots, similar to Apple devices. In stark contrast, the robots that were sought out to capture Roz, deployed by Universal Dynamics, were designed with polygonal, sharp edges. All of the UD robots are mostly devoid of color, although ones that do have hues aren't focused on as much in the final film. Funny enough, both sentiments ring true to smart speakers like Google Home and Amazon Echo. I'm not going to call it Google Nest. The numerous animal designs in the movie and in the novel are reminiscent to the works of Miyomi, and I'd previously attributed Puss in Boots 2 and Nimona to its similar visual feats, but I could also recall the Spider-Verse trilogy, The Mitchells vs. the Machines, and Arcane. What all of these animations had in common was that they strived away from cultivating a style of pure realism because that didn't contribute to the story and presentation that the crews wanted to show. Instead, they pushed for fully embracing the medium of animation, yet having a clear homage to traditional art, comic books, graphic novels, and individual art styles. The technology that we can access now allows for more experimental works like shown in these movies, and I'd love to see more stories told in creative ways such as these. It's not to say that I'm opposed to the Pixar style or whatever it's called. That term's outdated now too. It's only about how the visual style services the story. One of Pixar's own films, Soul, is a great example of this. The astral plane is full of blurs, pastel colors, and abstractions, while the scenes in Earth could be easily mistaken with live footage. The Wild Robot was also what appeared to be the final film to be animated internally within DreamWorks Animation, and that they would begin outsourcing their visual stage to different studios to reserve their budget. To me, The Wild Robot felt like a leap of faith in the visual innovation DreamWorks would undertake to support their compelling stories. I'm worried that, without their animators working this closely with the leadership department, future movies would lose their charm and spectacle. Although, I saw the trailer to the new Dogman film that's being animated by Jellybox Pictures, and it looks fantastic, so I shouldn't be too worried about this. The Wild Robot features an orchestral soundtrack that supports but also helps shape the scale of its visual expanse. Triumphantly, the score emphasizes its use of strings, brass, and percussion. The strings capture the beauty and life of the island, and the brass represents the prideful unity within the animals. The hammer and kick drums resemble a heartbeat, and are the sole source of rhythm and tempo. I thought the instrumentals were quite strong, but never too much to me. The overall score resembles how thrilling the music and trailers are. Chris Sanders recalled that around 80% of this film comprised the soundtrack, which really demonstrated how pivotal a role it had. A fantastic example of the score, which is already released, was within the instrumental of Kiss the Sky, a track that acted as a lyrical and poetic call to adventure that had played in the brief training montage. It incorporates musical elements and instruments from the existing score. The lyrics in the track feel like a myth or a prophecy, and directly engages the viewer in asking them questions about their own bravery. It prompts them to jump out of their comfort zone and live their life, to do all the things that they can set their mind upon. Even the crowd section has me all sappy. Kiss the Sky fits with the scene well. Its instrumentals were rejuvenating and were a great background to the lyrics. It's a song I could keep coming back to, a saving grace when I need motivation. After the screening, I ended up buying the original novel to read and compare it to the movie. Here's what I've noticed. The novel from 2016 shows a closer look at individual residents on the island, and Roz's gradual gratitude and appreciation towards them. The added level of detail could be considered a treat if you wanted to learn more about the rest of the characters and the island. However, that also means that not all of what the novel covers is presented in the film, only limited to a set runtime. Certain elements are excluded, simplified, or modified, like how the number of characters with very notable appearances is significantly reduced. In the novel, Fink was actually one of the very minor characters. Regardless, there is an added focus on the core of the main story in the film. The strong heart and genuinity from the novel translate even better on the big screen. If there's one thing I favor much more in the film, it's how it handles its mood and emotion. You can feel the authenticity in every scene. I'd also like to note something about the novel. Around its fourth quarter, there are some incredibly detailed and darker instances of casualty, injury, and murder, much more than the movie had ever touched upon. There are also some mildly uncomfortable visual panels in these chapters too. So, just a heads up. The question arises, should you start off by reading the novel before watching the movie? It all depends on what your preferred storytelling medium is, I'd say. I would have actually watched the movie first. I love how movies and television display stories with more of an attention to details, atmosphere, and emotion. Because of a definitive soundscape and visual world, you get to hear and see how the characters come to life in ways that written works can only describe. Shortly after the film's premiere, I noticed how the film was slowly being promoted more. Friends would come up to me mentioning how they saw trailers for this film on social media and cable. This was around the time I started writing and compiling all of my thoughts into a coherent script too, around a week and a half before its theatrical release on the 27th. I was really glad to hear that people were interested in watching the film themselves. Again, I'm really passionate about this movie, and I'd gush about it to everyone I can. Promotion can help not just movies, but other pieces of media like TV shows and games find their audiences. And I've seen that a lack of promotion could kill most chances of finding theirs. For example, Tangled the series. I got one of these Wild Robot commercials myself. A very recent one, in fact. And I found out that it debuted with 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. You don't see that every day. Not at all. It shows that the critics loved this. With the Oscars coming up soon, I'm betting that The Wild Robot has an incredibly strong chance at contending for Best Animated Picture or any other award that fits the medium. But regardless of accolades, I love this movie. The memorable cast, vivid visual style, and tales of determination all amalgamate into this masterful film that I would love for you all to watch. Maybe recommend to a friend too. But anyways, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my review. I'm Slagbroski, and here's to the release of The Wild Robot.